I will now call upon Mr. Vijay Kumar to share his experiences and areas where he thinks investments should happen from a CSR perspective.
Thank you and very good evening to all. Let me begin with something very grounded. In fact, the first technical session I liked both Lakshmi and Prashant talking about something which is very real and onto the ground. Let me highlight both of them given their importance and let add another very important ground reality. The first one, what Lakshmi beautifully articulated is that CSR cannot be a substitute to the total efforts which are required to upskill India and all of that stuff. It's only a very small contribution. We need to acknowledge that. We need to have that reality well understood. The second important thing what Prashant mentioned was, I see it more as an imperative. The employability or the employment gap, the need to provide employment for about 120, 200, whatever numbers which are there in the next 10 years, the demographic. Most of us would like to see it as an opportunity, but the way things are moving on the ground, at least the last 1.5 years, whatever we saw from the current government and its own challenges, the ability to provide that kind of employment. And we have history where we have not fulfilled the youngsters' aspirations. Empty mind, what Prashant was referring to, can lead to all kinds of social problems. It's scaring. It's honestly scaring and long way to go. Let me add a third and a very important point so that all of us understand the reality and we can have our expectations right. My experience, most occasions, disappointments come because of wrong expectations. Let's take the amount of money which is available for a CSR spend. A company having a revenue of 100, the net margin is about 5% for most organizations. Maybe you can make it 7, whatever net margin, that's at the PBT level. The amount you are required to spend is 2% of that 7, 2% of that 7, which makes it about 0.14. And this amount is calculated based on the average profit over the last 3 years. So if you assume a company has been growing over the last 3 years and arrive at this 2% amount and plug that amount to the current year of revenue which the company is chasing, as a percentage, that number is hardly 0.08, 0.07 of the total revenue of a company. Board members, CXO level positions, or even 2 leaderships level, you're talking about a minuscule number. Will we have attention of any of these people at the top for an amount of spend which is going to be so small when the company is having its own challenges of growth, strategy, competition, this, that, and all that stuff. We are talking about a very small amount. And typically initiatives like this, if you don't have that kind of a very high top level commitment, these initiatives are not likely to succeed. And given the reality that the cost of compliance has become so high, in fact, MGR also talked about it, and there is a question from a participant also. The reality is most companies today have this responsibility thrust on them that they need to do something on CSR. They need to do something. So given that kind of thrust which is there, somebody cannot say that I am not CSR savvy. There are certain things you can't say. You have to say that I am CSR savvy. So you have to put it on the website. You have to demonstrate as if you have all of these things. But the reality is at the top 3 levels, at the board, at the CXO level, and at the immediate level, and a corporate setup. Friends, pardon me if I am sounding very rude, but in a corporate setup where there is so much of pressures for performance, the top 3 layers time, to expect it to be spent for something which is a item which is after the PBT level, which does not impact any of the metrics of performance of that particular individual. It's a little unfair to even expect that kind of an attention. So there are corporates, public sector organizations which are big ticket CSR spends in absolute amounts. Big ticket CSR spends in absolute amounts, not as a percentage, in absolute amounts. Those public sector organizations will continue to spend, and they have their own process. Then coming to private sector, there are some of these very large organizations who have been doing these activities independent of the Companies Act, be it the Tatas or even Reliance. And you can go back 5 years back, annual reports of an organization like Reliance. You'll have minimum 5 pages in the director's report dedicated to what amount of efforts and expenditure is being incurred on CSR. So these organizations have been doing it and will continue to do it. They have been doing it much before all of this act came in, and they will continue to do it because the absolute amount is big, and for them it is a business compulsion. For them it is a business compulsion that I need to spend that kind of money. I can't set up a steel plant in some backward area and not take care of the 100 villages around. I need to do it. I need to do it for my physical security. I need to do it for my physical security of that particular factory which has been put there. So most organizations have been doing it, and those category of organizations will continue to do the same. They'll continue to do the same. Then there are the leftover organizations. Some where they're noble souls, they have seen enough in their life, they're in a position to give. Others going through their own challenges, 2-3 years of profit, 2-3 years of losses. The point I'm trying to start off with is, while all of us understand the imperative of skilling India, let's be very, very realistic about how much of CSR spend can actually help drive that particular goal. If at all, it can be very, very small. Now, what can be the right solutions? And I borrowed the solution from what Prashant actually mentioned, and I passionately believe that particular observation which he made. It's all about the culture of giving. It's all about the culture of giving. I recall my own personal experience when tsunami happened. When tsunami happened and so many people got displaced, my experience as a volunteer around, I was a very active Rotarian and all of that stuff. Every person whom I touched around that time, the need was not money. Everybody wanted time of the volunteers. They wanted physical effort of the volunteers. They wanted people to be there with them for the emotional connect and all. And every person who got devastated in that tsunami, experience is 10, 11 years old, but every person who got devastated in that tsunami was actually looking for that particular support for him to get back, And that was the important thing. So what's very important is, while we look at this entire CSR initiatives, it's important that at the leadership level, at organizations, at corporates, we are able to inspire a set of people to give their time, to give their effort. Money, my own view, there are plenty of NGOs, all of that stuff, money is coming in, all that kind of stuff. But it's all about the requirement of people's time and effort. And the solutions which can be fairly tangible if we want to make a difference is the people working in large corporates. In fact, what Sintel does, great initiative, and I'm sure organizations like Cognizant, Infi, all of them who are huge manpower-driven organizations who have 50,000, 1,50,000 employees, well-educated. It's all about inspiring that set of people to give their time, not the money, give their time, not the money, for reaching out to people in effectively deploying whatever activities. It can be educating or giving some time for the schools, all of that stuff. People talk about schools not being successful, but how many people have voluntarily chosen to become teachers over the last 30, 40 years? So all of us who have seen teachers, the people who have could not do something, they have come here. So where are the bright minds who are actually connecting with the students at a young age? So if a company like Infi, a company like Cognizance has all those bright minds, can we have an organized process where each employee annually gives 30 hours of his time to go and teach in some school in a very organized manner, or go and do whatever service in an organized manner, or go to a set of villages or set of people and upskill them to be digital savvy, all that kind of stuff. So it's all around that amount of time and effort, and people physical effort is what matters. Money is there, but as Lakshmi also mentioned, this money is small. And friends, let's understand, it's very small, and this money is not going to make the difference. It's not going to make the difference. And again, taking off from one more point which MGR was talking about on comply or explain. From a corporate point of view, I can share with you, not just my company, and I've been associated with several companies in various other capacities. Almost all companies do have a genuine understanding that they want to spend the money, but the challenge is about the ability to spend the money in compliance with the rules as envisaged and monitoring that particular spend which has happened. In fact, a very close reading of all those rules puts so much of responsibility on the directors to ensure that whether the money has been effectively spent. The pre-2013 days, we used to do whatever social spend, but we were never bothered about whether it was meeting that particular criteria. Now it's all become a case of doing a spend and trying to fit it within that particular criteria. It has itself brought an amount of limitation on the way it's to be done. So all corporates, my experience, they're all fairly geared to the thought that you need to do that spending, but there are challenges around spending. So you've tried to find what are the easier ways so that as an accountable member, as an accountable director, how can I ensure that it's a safe case? Recall I started off saying that the amount which you spend is 0.08% of your total revenue, and I don't want to have a default on this where a director or somebody gets a black mark. So easier ways, look at ways of contributing to some fund and things like that. Just make your life simple, and within the whatever time available, try to pick up some few activities. So that's the thinking which a good number of them have. So on CSR, let me conclude with the observations and a sincere appeal that please be very realistic about how much of difference it can actually make. And treat it, it's a small percentage. Public sector organizations have been doing before 2013 and will continue to do. Large corporates like Reliance, Tata's, all of them have been doing, will continue to do. So the incremental amount which comes is fairly small, and a good amount of it, for the various reasons which I meant, will go through schemes, which again will be government-driven schemes, and the ability to actually administer it and put it in practice is a fair amount of limiting factor. So thank you all for your patient listening.
Thank you, Mr. Vijay Kumar. I think very glad to hear from a CFO on what is the expectation that one might have when you walk in for a CSR spend or an investment, and in what priority order that do they look at. But what he also brought out, which he resonated with the earlier speakers, I think in terms of the time, effort, and probably the skills that the organization brings in is a lot more important than just mere funding. And if I take back to Mr. Lakshmana and Mr. Pradeep, getting about 30% of volunteering time, as he mentioned, 30 hours of that 1 lakh people, channelized into an area where you can really create an impact is extremely huge than just the mere dollar. I was just reading some statistic. World Bank over the last few decades, in every dollar that they spend, they expect a return of $10. So if it's going to be spending less, more amount of time volunteering, focused on right areas, maybe there are solutions. So for people who are approaching corporates with funding as the main criteria, I think there are areas to really think about. But he has also suggested there are other ways to really look at how to engage on CSR initiatives of corporates.